British authorities say the partner of a newspaper reporter who's been publishing Edward Snowden's leaks was involved in espionage and terrorism. The accusation was made in a Scotland Yard document, which is being used as evidence in a London court hearing. RT's Sarah Firth is closely following the case.
Now, the document was put together. It was read part of the legal action that David Miranda has launched against the British government. That's calling for the documents that were taken from him to be returned and questioning, indeed, the legality of his detention. If you cast your mind back to the end of August, he was detained when he arrived from Berlin at Heathrow Airport, questioned for 9 hours and had those documents seized from him. Now, that sheet that was read in court saying that the intelligence indicated that Miranda was likely to be involved in espionage activity and that it had the potential to act against UK security interests. But Glenn Greenwald reportedly responding, saying that they absolutely, explicitly are now equating terrorism and journalism. And of course, that is going to be causing huge concern. This is part of an ongoing debate here in the UK surrounding press freedom at the moment and causing a huge amount of concern. Just earlier this week, we reported on the Prime Minister David Cameron seeming to issue a veiled threat towards newspapers, saying that if they didn't show some restraint in publishing information, that action would be taken, although he'd said he didn't want to get heavy-handed. But of course, the detention in the first place of David Miranda, a journalist, carrying that information, much of which that's been published already, having been shown to have been in the public's interest, unveiling this information about mass surveillance. But consistently, we've seen the UK government try to steer the topic and the debate away from this mass surveillance issue and onto the issue of national security.
Well, a hearing for David Miranda's legal challenge is scheduled for next week. Let's talk about how it may play out and all the implications here involved with this case with Jim Killock. He's Executive Director of the Opens Right Group, joining me live now from London. Jim, don't the UK authorities have every right to apprehend somebody who's carrying thousands of leaked documents which are deemed to be harmful to the country's national security?
No, I don't think they do have that right. I mean, at the end of the day, what they've actually said is that this bloke is a threat to national security because he may be involved in disclosing information about national security, and that because he's doing that from a political or ideological motive, that equates with the definition of terrorism. So they're actually saying that this bloke is a terrorist, and that's why they're able to arrest him under terrorist laws, and I think that's just absolutely insane. It is equating the journalistic practice of taking leaked documents and looking at them and potentially telling the public about certain things in it with terrorism. And you can't do that.
And do you think this accusation of terrorism will affect his legal challenge then? What sort of impact could that have on his case?
Well, I don't know precisely what the impact of this on the case is, but I think that assuming that, I mean, these are the grounds that the state says, the police says that they arrested him and detained him for. I think that's extremely wide. I think it's extremely important that we look at how the police are willing to frame their use of terrorist laws. I think it's an argument for repeal of those laws.
And these are quite strong accusations, obviously, as you're saying. Why are we hearing about it now, when obviously he was apprehended, well, quite a long time ago?
Well, they've had to, because he's appealed, because this is now a matter of, you know, they're looking at it in the court and people are saying that the police should not have done this. The police are having to justify themselves to the courts, and that's why we're seeing what they've done. Great. I mean, at least we've got this in open court and we can see what's going on. We can challenge it. I mean, I think we've been seeing in the UK for many, many years terrorist laws being written in ways that could be abused. The governments of the day have always said, no, they won't possibly abuse them. Of course, these will only ever be used against terrorists. And here we see somebody with leaked material who's been very responsible. His partner, David Miranda, and The Guardian have been extremely responsible in the handling of this material. Nobody's been able to say, here, you've endangered national security. Genuinely, people have their lives at risk. Nobody's been able to show that. There's been accusations, but there's been nobody actually saying that's happened. So instead, what we've got is the police abusing their powers in order to intimidate these people. And I think it's good that we're seeing that that's going on, because now we can challenge it properly.
Glenn Greenwald has now accused the UK of having no press freedom. that's not true, is it? That's just going a bit too far, isn't it?
I think it would be wrong to say there is no press freedom. Of course, that would be overstating the case. But if you intimidate journalists in this way, if you say they can't look at leaked documents, they're not allowed to handle material that's sensitive, they're not allowed to make journalistic judgments about when to publish. I mean, that is the effect of what you're doing if you're saying you're going to arrest people under terrorist powers merely for possessing this information. Well, in that case, you are limiting the ability of the press to speak out, because you are saying, you know, if you do these things, you'll get arrested.
All right, but look, surely secrecy and the boundaries of law have to be respected. Just how open, then, Jim, should governments be until they do actually compromise national safety?
I think the US has got the right balance here. I mean, surprisingly, you'd think that the US would now be chasing down all the papers and trying to stop all the people who've been handling these documents. They are not. They are not going into the Washington Post and try and persuade them to destroy hard drives. They're just simply not trying to take those actions, and that's because their understanding of the balance is that it's a person who has leaked material, who's potentially in breach of laws. It isn't the journalists. The journalists have a right to publish. Their free speech is extremely important. They're not the people who are potentially guilty of crimes. That said, the way that they've pursued whistleblowers, including Edward Snowden, has been disgraceful. So it's not to say that everything is right about the United States, but at least in their approach to journalists, they haven't attempted to persecute them.
Jim Killock from the Open Rights Group in London, live here on RT. Thanks very much for your thoughts. Good to hear from you.